2, 3.
Welcome to Paidaxiology. Conversations on the value of children.
All right, Marcella, introduce yourself to our great audience.
Sure. My name is Marcella Burke. I'm an attorney and a former government official. I own a law firm, and my husband and I started an oil company. So we do that. And I have 4 children and a 5th on the way.
Amazing. Do you want to show us your bump?
Yes. So
because you look really terrific.
I don't have enough maternity clothes, and I refuse to buy more. And so it's not a maternity shirt. So I was showing Catherine earlier that it's like half my stomach is actually sticking out of the bottom. You weren't supposed to see that on the podcast, but now we just decided to show everybody.
No, I think this might be a feature of this podcast is show us your bump. Show us your bump. For people who are show us your bump. I don't know. We're gonna have to come up with traditions and lingo on this pod. But you are like number 4, episode 4, I think.
Cool.
So, but thank you so much for joining us. I would just start with everything you just said. I think that there's a lot you started an oil company, you own your own law firm, but take us back to the beginning of your family. And I mean, I know a lady never tells her age, but you sound like you've lived about 3 lifetimes.
Yeah.
But so where did you meet your husband?
I met Steve. I think I'm the last living millennial who met my husband at a bar. We met at a bar. Yep. And we were introduced by a mutual friend from college. I went to Texas A&M. And my friend Jeff, who played football for A&M, was a bouncer on Northgate, which is sort of like where all the bars are on campus, is now Father Jeff. And he grew up playing baseball and football with my husband, who also played Division I football. And so we were all out one night, and Jeff came in with Steve and some other guys, and I was with some girls, and we just met. We met through Jeff.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And amazing. And so, how old were you? Where were you in your life stages?
Yeah. So I was out of college. I was studying for the LSAT. I was working at a law firm.
Okay.
And I was going to go to law school. And so sort of discerning law school, I think the decision had pretty much been made at that point. So whenever I met Steve, it was, when we started dating, I mean, it was obviously he was interested in dating someone who is at least about to invest a lot of time and money in becoming a lawyer. So.
Okay. And then did you, what's the timeline? How long did you date? When did you go to law school? That next year?
When we met, I think 27 or 28. We were engaged about, I think, the same year, the year. And then we got married by, that was within the next year. So within 2 years of meeting, we were married. And I was in law school when we got married.
Okay. Great. And where did you go to law school?
At University of Houston in Houston. So I do oil and gas and environmental law. And very intentionally, there's a few schools that are known for that. And so that was a sort of targeted strategy to do environmental law and do defense work, represent oil and gas companies. I've seen the energy industry as just a lever out of poverty. There's like a direct correlation between access to clean, affordable energy and levering out of poverty. So just really interested in helping facilitate the energy industry.
Yeah, that's really great. I love the the comment in the sense that a lot of people say well, I'm an economist, it's a weird thing for a girl to be interested in. I'm like, no, I was interested in public health and, curing disease and helping people not be sick. I wanted to be a doctor. And then sort of, towards middle of college, I kind of realized actually if you really want to make a lot of people healthier and make their lives better, you have to get them access to markets and goods.
Exactly. And I think it is probably part of the feminine genius, to find that side of the coin. Yeah. But that's always been hugely motivating for me.
Yeah.
Is the impact on women and families when you compare countries with access to energy and not. And what's the quality of life for women, children, and families?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was in college, I don't think I've told this story for a while. One of my economist teachers, professors who had an influence on me, he was kind of coaching me to apply to PhD programs. And he said, well, there's a personal statement. You have to tell these graduate committees why you want to go to grad school. And I said, so it's not I can't just tell them that I don't want people to be poor and hungry. And he was like, you cannot tell them that you don't want them to be poor and hungry. You have to tell them that you really care about like fine-tuning economic models and the literature and making a contribution. And I was like, so you want me to lie? Because actually what I'm really interested in, I'm really interested in how like, how places where people are poor can become less poor and people could eat food and be satisfied and raise their families in security and comfort. And he's like, look, everybody says that, you can't say that. So I did sort of write this like jaded, like I really just care about technical issues essay, but I felt pretty bad about that. I was like, so I've tried to encourage my students to embrace idealism.
A lot of my ideas too about working came from when I was an undergrad and I learned about the Acton Institute and Father Sirico and his work on work.
Yeah.
And getting a lot of these ideas, I went to like, it was probably one of the first sort of organized things I did after like high school, where I went to like an Acton University, and it was probably one of the first ones they ever did. And they talked a lot about economics and poverty and this and that. And they had a series that eventually came out on the poverty here, but they talked a lot about energy. And I had been discerning going to law school. And I had, and this is where, just thinking about, am I going to work or not, or do I want to get married or what? And ever since I was really young, feeling like I want to do, big things, great things, and thinking at one point that meant maybe I should be a nun, if the only way to be a great saint is to like be a nun or something, and then discerning religious life and discerning out of that, and then discerning going into the public square and doing civics and those types of things, and just having lots of questions on, can women even do that? And should they, especially if they want to get married, and really going through all those sort of like academic, but also religious, spiritual exercises, thinking about discerning that, and then coming across the Acton Institute and hearing all about the work that they do. And I'm like, it just sort of lit my heart on fire about, no, this is what I want to do. I do want to be a lawyer, and I want to defend this industry and these people. And there's so many lies that are being told about climate change and about the world ending and about all these things that are just lies from the pit of hell. And I think it also, it just goes into my personality and temperament to sort of be just to challenge that. And so that's what I did as I went into law school, and I was strategic about which school I'd go to and where would I get the most scholarships and what are the law schools that have the best relationships with the biggest firms to get me the best experience to really do it. And that's what we did. But it was a part of a big process of discernment and thinking through and a lot of spiritual direction even, because there's just a lot of mixed messages on the role of women, whether women should work, all that kind of thing. And they've been in the background for decades, probably since the Industrial Revolution, but obviously come to the forefront in a big way right now with different political type pundits, saying, really opening the Overton window on the role of women in work on sort of both sides of the political aisle. So anyway. Yeah.
So interesting. I can sort of see you as a Teresa of Avila. You seem Teresa of Avila-ish, I mean, I don't know if Teresa of Avila is was a lawyer defending oil and gas, like it would be you.
She's like my hero. And when I first was evangelized and really embraced my faith, it was a priest named Father Bill Young, and he introduced me to Teresa of Avila. She's the first saint where I ever really, picked up a book and read it, and so she's someone I'm quite devoted to. I just saw the other day a quotation she said from her like journal, but it was Jesus telling her, "I would create the universe again just to hear one time that you say you love me." How beautiful is that? But Teresa of Avila, she's a force of nature. And and then she inspired Trezor Lisieux, who's another force of nature, who inspired Mother Teresa, who's a real hero of mine. And so the three of them in our house, we kind of call them the trifecta of these amazing women who are all very different, but all are named sort of after each other and all said a lot of the same things. Yeah. So anyway, it's funny that you say that, because Teresa of Avila is like she's a hero.
I think you have a lot of her spirit. It's very clear. And what book of hers did you read when you had that awakening?
So the first one was,
because we'll put We'll put that in the notes. We will let people find these things because, a lot of the curiosity is sort of like, what drives us, what makes us the kind of people that we are.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So what did you read?
I would say the first book she wrote that I read was Interior Castle. And that's sort of like advanced. She'd done a lot of writing. That was one of her latest. But Thomas DeMay wrote a book, I think called Fire Within. And it's about Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross's spirituality. And that was the first book. I was 15. Father Bill said, I want you to read this book and come back next week. He gave me a week to read this thing and tell me what you think.
I'm going to do this.
Yes.
I'm going to do this. It's like literally behind my head.
Yes.
It's amazing.
I still have a copy, which is Father Bill's copy. And Virgil always said, only your friends steal your books. So I still have Father Bill's copy.
I'm fairly convinced this doesn't render correctly. Like no one will actually be able to read the title. It's like some kind of reverse image. But anyway, here's the book. For people who want to know what makes the Catholic ladies tick, here we are. Like it's behind my head.
It's awesome. That book is really good.
It's so great.
And it's interesting too, because Teresa of Avila, I mean, she was a nun, obviously. Okay. But she really had her.
She didn't drink margaritas.
She
didn't drink margaritas.
She would have loved margaritas if they had margaritas.
They probably all drank a lot more beer. They probably did. Like they probably drank a lot more beer and sangria. I don't know.
Spain.
But all right.
Enough, and people don't talk about this. But she was like she was very wealthy, and sort of her convent, like her, she had all these like trinkets and she was just like this sort of worldly woman, which all these nuns were, and the convents were sort of like sorority houses, and they're fraternizing with the brothers, and there wasn't. I mean, So anyway, St. John of the Cross is really who came in to reform the Carmel and wanted to recruit her to help him. And she fell in love with him. And she climbed over the Carmel wall, which if you ever go to see it, it's like 5 stories or something. I mean, it's like huge. She goes into his cell and she tries to seduce him. Okay. This is
wild. This is
40s,
wild.
And he's like 27 or 28. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
He's like, you don't love me. It's the Jesus inside of me. Like he's like not threatened by this woman at all, which is a lesson to be learned by a lot of men who face these formidable women. And he says, no. And he sort of becomes her spiritual director. And the two of them, she's gorgeous. She's a force of nature. I mean, she's like, it's sort of like if, I don't know, Sophia Loren was like some evangelical Catholic. And the two of them, I mean, help reform the entire church, essentially. But it's an amazing story. And she was someone who was really sort of gender buster. I hate to say that in her time, too. A lot of these medieval type saints and the Spanish mystics and all that were very dynamic. Yeah. And I think especially women.
That's amazing. So just piecing your story together, the encountering Teresa of Avila happens when? Like when you said you sort of reconnected with your faith? I'm not sure what word you used. When was this in relation to college, law school, meeting Steve?
That was in high school. And that was, I was also introduced by Father Bill to John Paul II. And it was sort of, he was doing World Youth Days and giving his, be not afraid, go into the deep, all these things. And I started thinking about religious life. I went to college, and by my sophomore year, I decided to take a year off college to discern religious life and do mission work. I stayed with a number of different convents, Sisters of Life, the CFR, Capuchin Friars of the Renewal, some other orders, all great orders. But I mean, I remember with one of them, I had like smuggled in a tweezer, and you can't like bring anything. And I got caught, and I remember being like, I don't understand. Why do you have to have a unibrow to be a nun?
I'm literally like, tweezers for your brows. Yeah. Okay.
Like, sure, you have a vocation. Has God ever told you he wants to marry you? And I'm like, no, that's so weird. Like, is that what y'all think? It's like, Marcella, you might not have a vocation.
You might not have a vocation.
And so it was pretty fun and pretty cool that, these religious orders, this is part of the renewal of the church too. It's some of these more evangelical religious orders with younger women. And they weren't just looking for warm bodies, right? And it was a number of these orders that said, have you ever thought about law school? Like, we really need women to be in the world everywhere. John Paul II says, everywhere there's a man, there should be a woman. And women and men complement each other. And it's not that she should be his like secretary or making the coffee necessarily. Maybe that's the role, but we aren't made to be alone as individuals, like as single humans, but also just in work or whatever community we're in, men and women are meant for one another. We complement each other. And it's this complementarity of the sexes that I've always found really interesting. And so it was Teresa of Avila, Lisieux, Mother Teresa, John Paul II. Through John Paul II, I started reading a lot about magnanimity and the political virtues and getting, what does it mean to be called to greatness and to do big things? And that contradicts with or does it with Teresa Lisieux, always saying do small things with great love. And how does all this work together? And how do we have these great souls? And I studied a lot of Aristotle and his ethics and on magnanimity and the political virtues. And then Aquinas baptizes it. But it really isn't until John Paul II and Edith Stein that they start talking about specifically women and these political virtues and women in the public square and the role women have. And John Paul gave homilies on this and wrote on this. And it was seen as sort of controversial. He was the first religious leader to ever talk about women having a role, like a true leadership role in the public square. And so it's, really interesting. And he's who, I can't remember who put up Zélie Martin for canonization. I think it was him, but I think Francis canonized her. But the mother and father of Teresa Lisieux and Saint Zélie Martin, was a woman, turn of the century, who worked and owned built her business into a factory. And her husband stayed home and sort of was fixed watches. And had all these kids, 5 of whom became religious. And then Teresa of Lisieux, of course, is a canonized saint. But we canonized a mom who worked outside of the home, right? Or Joan of Arc is a huge hero of mine who was a teenage girl who ran an army. We operate under consistent ethics and universal principles. If it applies to one person, it applies to everyone. And so to the extent, we don't say Joan of Arc is the exception to the rule. She's now become the rule. Women can do these things. Teresa of Avila has become the rule. Teresa Lisieux has become the rule. Mother Teresa has become the rule. And so women can do these things. Zélie Martin has now become the rule. Women can work and have kids, and their kids can become great saints, and they can become great saints. So all this sort of mind-blowing was the type of stuff I was reading in college. And so by the time I got out of college, I'd sort of reconciled all this and didn't have sort of Catholic guilt or Christian guilt about women and working and all that stuff, which I struggled with from high school through college.
Okay.
Because I'd just done a lot of reading and studying and
Did your mom work? So I think the models from what our childhood sometimes inform that guilt or that.
Yes, my mom did work. She was an MD, PhD. She was a doctor. She had 6 kids. Okay. There were 6 of us. Okay. My dad was a professor.
Wow.
He went to.
Can I interview her next?
Yeah, you can. I'll give you her number. She's
amazing.
Yeah, she's a very dynamic woman, and she ended up doing a lot of pro-life work and was one of the co-founders of something called the Gabriel Project, which a lot of Catholics might be familiar with. Outside of most parishes in the United States, there's a sign with an image of Our Lady saying "pregnant, need help," and it's a phone number, and it'll be a woman in the parish who is trained. Yeah. And I remember growing up where pregnant women would show up on our doorstep because it was my mom's phone number, and she would counsel them as a doctor and to help them choose life. And this is sort of how we grew up, went to pro-life marches and all that stuff. And I remember being really young, and there was a picture of my mom's trash can of an aborted baby, and she did not mean for me to see it. But I was way too young to see it, and it really radicalized me. I mean, it's one of those images burned in my head that I still remember exactly the position of the paper in the wastebasket.
Yeah.
And so she, and she was formidable. She went to med school, I think, when she was 15. She met my dad when she was lecturing at Cambridge, and he was a grad student there. Wow. So, intellectual, smart parents.
Yeah.
And my mom, so she was out there working, and so
amazing.
So it wasn't like a scandal, the idea, but I do think a lot of my friends, their parents, the mom work. And then in the circles in which I associate and have friends, even in college, there's few of us where the woman works. Yeah. Really, most of my best friends homeschool and don't work. And so I'm sort of, I don't really fit neatly because most of my, social friends through church or whatever, the woman does not work. And then in my professional life, until I started my own law firm, women did not have kids.
They didn't have kids. Yeah, exactly.
And they don't.
You're a bad fit.
So you're sort of like a no man's land, I think. It's like
I can relate. I can relate 100%. Keep going. No, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's sort of the thing. And but and then I met my husband at the bar, and we were about 28, and I was going to go to law school, and he thought it was great. And I remember too, because I dated a number of guys who'd become priests, and it's because I kept meeting them at church. And I remembered actually, it was a priest friend of mine who was like, well, I hate to say friend. I mean, he was a priest, so priest of mine. But he was like, well, Marcella, maybe you should meet guys outside of church. Because if you're meeting guys in church, maybe they have a priestly vocation. And I would ask, if I was dating a guy that I met in church, have you ever thought about whether you had a priestly vocation? And often they would say, oh, yes, actually. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to date a priest. That's weird. So actually, I dated enough guys that I met at church that became priests that a bishop cold called me and asked me to be on his vocation screening committee. He said, all of these guys, like they're these normal air quotes guys who played say Division I football or whatever. Like, they're some of our best guys. Would you be on my vocation screening committee? If you wouldn't date them, I don't want them. And will you interview these men? And it was sort of heartbreaking. Like, I'm literally never get married. Like, is my vocation to help men become priests or whatever? Which maybe it is. I have 4 sons now, but but then I met Steve, and I remember one of our first dates. It's like hurricane season in Houston, so of course, let's go do Meals on Wheels or let's go do whatever. And we were doing Meals on Wheels on one of our first dates after this hurricane. And he had said, oh, there's this big church. He's like, oh, do you want to stop in? Like, I've never been in this church. And I was like, oh, gosh, he's probably supposed to be a priest. And I'm just going to ask him, do you think you have a priestly vocation? And he's going to say yes. And there's another one bites the dust. And we're sitting there. And I was like, did you ever think about having a priestly vocation, in this church? And he was like, like in 7th grade, I think they talked about it. And then not really. And then it came up in confirmation. And I was like, no. He's like, I've always known I want to get married and have kids.
Oh, good. So you're like, all right, sign you up.
I was like, no, Father was right. Meet the guys at the bar. That's where you meet the guys.
That's the where to meet the guys.
Yeah, and no dating app involved. And so we started dating. Yeah, so it was great.
That's great. Tell us about margaritas and babies.
Yeah.
And when does this start?
So we always wanted to have kids. It's obvious. I can say obviously for me and Steve. And I always wanted a big family. And so we wanted, and Justice Scalia, sort of when I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, I started studying, Catholics and the legal profession. And Scalia was sort of a titan, still is. Clarence Thomas, Justice Alito, but there's so many others. Yeah. And I would read their stuff and listen to their stuff. And Scalia had a great line where he said, when anyone gave him a hard time for having 8 children, he would say, well, if you think I'm ambitious, you should meet my wife. And I loved how he framed having kids as being sort of a noble ambition. Again, this is like the virtue of magnanimity, being big-hearted. Yeah. And so what are you so afraid of? And for the woman, for his wife, to actually be the more magnanimous one, to actually have the bigger heart, to be more ambitious, because she's the one who wanted the kids, which he would say is way harder than sitting up here on Constitution Avenue, reading a record and telling people who's right and wrong about stuff, as opposed to forming these children into, good citizens. Yeah. And so Scalia was always inspiring to me. So Steve and I talked about this, and we decided that we were going to have a slogan in our marriage, which is always be at least as ambitious for the family as I am for career, air quotes. And it's not career qua career. It's a sense of God doing something with me in the world as a woman who's going to be married. And so if that's your definition of career, I guess that's like a definition of career, but always making sure to temper that with, so what does that look like? We're going to have to put in something as a proxy to reverse engineer to make sure this doesn't become just an idea, but it's actually a principle to live by. So for example, anytime I applied for a clerkship, a fellowship, when I was up for partnership, when I was up for equity partnership, when I applied for a position as a senior government official in the Trump administration, anytime I was going to do anything that was going to propel or provide a credential in the career, we would actively try to have a kid. So like we would completely buck the conventional wisdom of, oh, you're applying for law school, you have to wait. Oh, you're taking the LSAT, you have to wait. Oh, you're taking finals, you have to wait. Oh, you're going to do a clerkship. Well, it's still not a good time. Oh, now you're up for a fellowship. Oh, a partnership. There will never be a time. Oh, you should just freeze your eggs. We're giving you, here's a program, blah, 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 blah. So we just ignore this whole thing and say, anytime I'm doing anything, we're going to try to have a kid. And so it's like the margarita principle. So it's like, hey, I just learned about this new fellowship and I think I'm going to apply. It's like, well, turn on the blender, you know? And so I've basically been pregnant for the entire 15 years we've been married. And we have 4 boys now, but I've had 7 miscarriages. And we miscarried twins at one point. That was really rough. And so it's, again, I think part of this ambition is not just to do great things in society to the extent that God gives those opportunities. I mean, it's, you know, you sort of want to build good habits and virtue and character. And then if God gives me the opportunity to do something great, I want to be in a position to actually have the virtuous capacity to take it. So that's one thing. But also in my family, to always be prepared for greatness there and to be open to life. And I remember I think I was pregnant with my 3rd, and I had a friend who's a Christian, who's a lawyer. And I remember she said, I was pregnant with my 4th. I just announced to some friends, but, you know, started telling friends. And she sincerely said, but isn't 3 enough? Like, isn't 3 enough? And I said, listen, if you were told by your boss, we're going to give you $1 million bonus this year, will you take it? She was like, well, yeah. And I'm like, God just gave me like $1 trillion bajillion bonus. I'm going to take it, you know? But to even have to analogize using something like dollars and cents, the life of my 4th child is what's happened to, even in Christian circles, you know, I would say a lack of ambition for family. And women are so allowed to want to sort of be bosses and take over whatever, and let that become unmoored from a sense of vocation or calling, and then completely unmoored from your family. And in a lot of circles, including Christian circles, it's not like what birth control do you like, whether you use birth control, it's what type. And it's sort of seen as irresponsible. And at some point when you have 2 or 3 kids, it's not whether the husband gets the vasectomy, it's when. And all these people sterilize themselves before they're 35. And here I am. I mean, I'm 43, pregnant with my 5th after my 7th miscarriage with 4 kids. And, you know, it's, and people look at me like I'm crazy. And my answer is it's ambition. Like I'm ambitious, you know, and I just get this, and it's become where the sense I would get when I learned about a fellowship or a clerkship or an opportunity or partnership, and you're like, I want that. I want to achieve that. I see a family with like 7 kids, and I'm like, I want that. Like that's what I want. And so that allowing yourself as a woman to be ambitious for whatever it is God wants you to do. And you really have to do a lot of ignoring, because women, we do suffer from social contagion. And so you have to be really careful about who your circles are, who your friends are, and you have to stay connected and pray and be close to your husband and all those things. Because if I only listened to my friends and it was my friends from work, I'd have no kids. And if it was only my friends from church, I wouldn't work. So you also have to sort of take everything with a grain of salt and really put your ear to the ground of what God wants you to do, which again brings me back to people like Teresa of Avila, Mother Teresa, Sally Martin. These are women who you might look as, oh, they're so conventional. They were nuns, they're saints. But when you read their lives, Catherine of Siena, it's like radical women who absolutely did their own thing and, you know, stood up to popes and, you know, These are not well-behaved women,
Yeah.
and they're all
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
saints. So
Yeah. I love that. There's so many pieces of your your monologue there that I would like to dig into. I mean, one of them is just, going back to the margaritas and babies. You could turn on the blender. I mean, I want to make sure people understand what's going on there, which is like, we're going to try to have a baby, and so we're going to make margaritas.
yeah,
Okay,
if you
so,
ask my kids where do babies come from, they'll say margarita.
I know. I mean, I'm actually concerned, like YouTube may take this down. Like, it's like, this is not the sort of content YouTube wants to have online. But what I love about that is this kind of idea that, like, the way I've put it is like everybody around you, like you were talking about, you have to turn off some of that noise. Everybody around you, when you talk to women, is they are ambitious for your career. They're ambitious for work.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in, I mean, my dad used to call it the horsey set, the people who like, kind of like it's just like the waspy elite of the United States. Like there's a whole set of things that go along with being in the horsey set. And I don't know what we should call it, but it's sort of like the sort of talented, elite, high achieving educational class, the horsey set or whatever. Everybody is going to be, oh, here's a fellowship, here's a clerkship, here's a thing, here's the script. Do it all.
Yep.
That's all great. The issue is that there is no counterweight. There is nobody like, here's an invitation to make your next baby. There is no one's sort of out there calling that forth, right? And so instead of planning around your babies, which I think is the way people would have thought about it in the past, you have to plan for your babies.
Exactly.
And
you have to plan
that sounds
for being open to having babies, because you have to anticipate as a woman that you are susceptible to a chronic level of certainty to social contagion. Okay.
Yes.
So if you are a female, you are going to do, in all likelihood, 99% likely of whatever the 5 women closest to you think you should do.
Yeah.
So you have to really anticipate that and know really what is my goal. And so Steve and I would write it down. We do our goals every year. The future belongs to people who like write their dreams down. It's like, I want to be a great saint. Here's what I want on my saint card. Here's like, these are exercises Father Bill made me do in high school that like, I still am like, this is so good. Because then on top of it, you want these other, God's whispering these other things he wants you to do in the silence of your heart, in adoration, night after night. And you're like, how is this compatible? Because these 5 people I'm friends with, I mean, obviously you can't do all that. So you have to plan for God's will to look different. And the idea that Christians, like, we all look alike and we're cookie cutter. No, like if you just look at Jesus and the Bible and church history and the saints, everyone actually is called to be like sort of wildly unique. And I think you have to anticipate. So that's what I sort of was trying to say with Steve and I. Yeah. There's nothing that's going to call you into having more kids, which sometimes you might get a homily. I guess if you're lucky, a priest might actually say, hey guys, have another kid. Yeah. You might ever in your life have a priest with enough courage to say that. Yeah. But generally they'll definitely, the world will encourage you to do all these other things like you're saying. So that's what we did. Yeah. We said, well, we will force upon ourselves the reminder that when we're trying to be ambitious, we're going to make sure that we're at least as ambitious for the family. And then on top of that, we want to be great saints. And so be at least as ambitious for your sainthood as you are for your family. And so you got to put God first too, and not idolize the family and make sure that you're not using family as an excuse to not engage in the public sector or the world or in the PTA or whatever. That actually, we have to, as women, really listen and not use staying home and, making sourdough and having chickens as an excuse to not engage at the local public library. I mean, we really have to figure out like what actually is the virtuous thing. And it might not be what all the girls in your Bible study say. You might actually have to do something a little different and uncomfortable. And so we just have put it into our marriage that it's baked in, that we're just going to be different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. The other thing that I love that you talked about is just this sense of like, isn't it enough? Or the pushback on that. So I love the story of like, if your boss gave you $1 million bonus, you wouldn't say no to that. Yeah. And so I've struggled to try to convey what that is. So there was an NPR host who interviewed me about the book material about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And she said, well, I think my children are blessings. And so you say that the big thing is that these people think their children are blessings. Like, why are we different? And I said, well, because the sense in which we mean it is that children are like wealth or health. No one's done being wealthy and no one's done being healthy, and all things being equal, and they're not always equal, but all things being equal, I would always want another child.
Right.
And she was like, oh, that right there, that is different. So it's like you have to go beyond your children are a blessing. I do think most people experience their children as a blessing, to kind of spelling it out that there's an estimation of the value of children, which is, and so this is where you did it explicit. You were like, well, $1 million bonus. I just got a trillion gajillion bonus, right? Like it's in a sense, it's incommensurable, but if you wanted to compare it, you'd be like, add a lot of zeros. And that is
people speak is the language of materialism. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're allowed to value money. We're allowed to use money as a proxy for success. Now, obviously that's like
Jesus did all the time. I mean, like that's like the whole gospel is like, if this is how you reason about material things, all the more so you should reason that way about spiritual things.
100%. So you just leverage the vocabulary and try to sort of baptize the materialism and hope that this like horrible loose analogy will somehow echo the truth that kids are better than like money.
For me, it was easy because in my profession, you don't get money if you work really hard. You just publish a boring paper. And I was always like, well, I know that I would never postpone a child in order to write another boring paper. And so I was like, well, the papers could come later, but I'm going to have kids while I can have kids, because no one's writing you $1 million check if you work a little harder in my profession.
Well, and in my profession, I mean, people talk about I'll take time off and come back. It's almost impossible because the law is adapting and changing, and you have to practice law to kind of know. You almost have to go sort of back to school. I mean, it's just, and we can do hard things, and people do it all the time. Yeah. But we've never paused my practice of law. We've just kept going. And so we've just embraced the idea that there's going to be pain and suffering. So like I'm, having a baby in 6 weeks, and I have a board meeting last night and 2 Christmas parties, and I'm wearing, 3.5-inch heels. And someone's like, what are you doing wearing heels? And I said, well, I felt so sick this morning that it's so uncomfortable that the only proper response is to put on makeup and your highest heels and say, okay, body, you think you're uncomfortable now? I'll show you uncomfortable. We're doing it in heels today, sister. And I just wear heels all day. And it's like, I will discipline my body. Thank you very much. And we will offer this up, as opposed to the temptation, which I would call a temptation of just kind of like, I'm going to sit it out today. I'm not going to sit it out today. I want to be a great saint. I know God's called me into this arena. Yeah. And so, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to do it in heels, and I'm going to offer it up. Yeah. And so it's really just about like raising the bar, going next level and challenging. And then I have this amazing husband who also is always challenging me too. And so he's amazing. And he'll be someone when I come home and he'll be like, have you responded to this email? Have you done this thing? I mean, he's pushing, that. So he doesn't let me entertain temptations. We call it acedia, but sort of this temptation to be afraid of engaging in these relationships and in these issues of our day. Yeah. And to just stay home and stay on our phones. My husband doesn't allow me that either.
A lot of people listening are going to be like, okay, but seriously, how does the sausage get made? What are the like, do you have like an army of domestic staff? Like, how does this work? I think people do want to know a little bit. Anything you want to share there? The other question I have is like, what does your husband do? So he seems to know about your work, but do you guys work together or?
Yeah. So the first question, what do? We have a nanny, and we've had 3 nannies. 2 of them, their kids have been like their high school valedictorian. So pretty high standards. Yeah. And she's amazing. She's been with us since the very beginning. And when we moved to DC, we found another amazing nanny, another valedictorian, type mom. And then we came back to Houston after we left the Trump administration, and the same nanny been with us since. So she's amazing. And she comes in the morning, she leaves at 5. And when the kids are at school, she helps with carpool, and then she's cooking and cleaning. And so, groceries are done online on the app. The nanny picks them up. I can hardly remember the last time I, folded a dining room table mountain full of laundry unless my nanny calls me and she can't come in for some reason. And then I'm taking all my calls folding laundry that day. But really, we've just sort of delegated a lot of that stuff. Even in law school, I remember Steve was like, he would grocery shop when we were married and I was in law school. And I didn't grocery shop like for 2 years.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're not wasting, you're studying. Like, are you kidding me? And we had decided if I did law school the first year, if I didn't really crush it and if I wasn't like top 5% of the class and getting a full ride after my first year, I was going to drop out. Like, we're not taking on debt to just go get some job. We're going to go get the job. And so I wasn't allowed to grocery shop, Yeah. And so it's sort of that sort of principle of like, what's the highest and best use of time? And like, what's the, we have a real sense of urgency with time. And I never, again, felt guilt like, oh, I'm the mom, so I should be folding the laundry. It's like, no, that's something that like I have zero guilt about outsourcing. So there's that. We have our nanny, and then we have a few babysitters. I will not hire a babysitter who I don't know, have references. I don't do like, let's find an babysitter on an app online. No. Yeah. And so we actually have very few babysitters. So we'll turn down, if one of our few people can't babysit, either we'll turn down the opportunity or only Steve or I'll go. So we just turn down a lot of stuff. And there's sometimes you have to just have trust that like, Marcella, even if you can't make it to that dinner, God's bigger than that dinner. You can't make it to the conference. God's bigger than the conference, and so family first, right? So I don't know. It's, I guess we call it trade-offs economically. We make lots of trade-offs. And again, it's like God, family, and then work, but we take work really seriously. Like, work is not like down there. Work's in the Trinity, the trifecta of what work's important. Again, work was given to us before the fall, and it's our opportunity to help God redeem the world. And it is actually our path to sainthood and sanctity, along with my marriage and raising the kids. And so we take it really seriously that we have to really balance these things. But the sausage making, nanny, I don't like cook a lot. I cook some. There's things I really do well. Like, it's like this really great advice I got. Like, if you're going to do stuff for your kids at school, like, always get the dessert. So if there's an Easter party or a Christmas party, it's awesome when the mom plans the whole thing. She gets no credit. Yeah. The lady who gets the credit is the one who brought the cupcakes. Like, bring the cupcakes. And then your kid is like, my mom brought the cupcakes. Like, how easy is that? So like, I bring the cupcakes to the party and it's like, it's great. And so it's little like that, like just trying to be smart about how and whether my kid's school, you can go to lunch at the school. And so just calendaring it and treating it like it's a meeting with the Pope. I mean, it's like, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
I don't know. You just make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick pause. How old are your kids now?
We have the 4 boys. They're all under 10.
All under 10.
So basically 4, 6, 8, 10. And then we have the baby on the way.
Okay. And when do they start school or preschool? Like they're going in at 5 or 6 kindergarten, or you're doing preschool?
We have a preschool by our house. It's like a 9 to 2. And so we do that for like our 3-year-old. He loves it. Yeah. And so the nanny drops him off and picks him up, and he does that. Okay. And so she's shopping and laundry and dry cleaning errands and stuff. Yeah. Stuffing my law firm Christmas card. Yeah. Whatever we need, her to do. And
I was thinking this might be the year that I get a family Christmas card out, but my daughter, who's 20, just laughed at me. I was like, this might be the year that we haven't managed it for a long time.
Exactly. It's, maybe. You never know. We're having a baby in January. Eternal. So my plan is maybe I'll do like a baby announcement card thing.
Yeah. So. And will you take time off? It's work for yourself. So what's your maternity leave policy?
Yeah.
What is your...
No, I mean, it's funny. I did take maternity leave my first baby when I was an associate. I really haven't taken one since. And that's part of what I signed up for. I don't feel entitled to a huge, 5-6 month deal, because that's what they tell me in 2025 is the only way to make it work. So no, I mean, typically the last few babies, I'm checking emails and I'm sitting there with my epidural and I'm like making sure that this one issue is resolved. And then sort of, it's not like I'm back at it at the office grinding over a brief. I mean, I have a team and I have partners and associates, but it's all part of the mix. it's all part of the
Yeah.
mix. So also, I mean, it's hard to say. It depends on sort of how delivery goes or whatever. I'll tell you this
Yeah.
though, after you have a baby, you feel like a million times better. And it'll,
I know.
when people are like, how do you work 2 weeks after having a
I
baby?
know.
I'm like, how did I
Like it was-
work 2 months before having a baby is the question.
I know.
Right now, it's way harder to work in the discomfort of
Yeah.
pregnancy than it is when the baby's out and you suddenly lost 40 pounds overnight and you feel like agile and like it's actually easier to work. Thank you very much after the baby. So I don't know. It's all kind of relative.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just don't have those expectations. I've also taken on like these ideas, which could get me, you know, the comments I won't read later, but just, you know, you sort of embrace the pain. It's like when I wake up feeling bad, that's when I put on the 3-inch heels. It's like, let's go. Like, I dare you to stop me. And so, so yeah, you have the baby and you keep working and it really hasn't, I don't know. I don't know. I'm happy. So, you know, that's another thing. Tree's known by its fruit. So
yeah, that's pretty great. Do you want to give us a Marcella hot take on the Helen Andrews position?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, right? Offline here. And now it's settled in the online discussion a little bit. You know, how do you see her idea that kind of like, you know, DEI and woke in the workplace is kind of, it's all a female thing. Like thinking back to your John Paul II days as a teenager and your kind of Teresa of Avila, women could do great things. Like, are these two things on a collision course? Is there any truth in what she said? Hot takes?
Yeah, so she's who said basically that the toxic femininity, right? The thesis is toxic femininity. I mean, first blush, like absolutely agree that just as much as there can be a man who behaves badly and we could label that as toxic, there's a lot of baggage, of course, with the word toxic. Of course, a woman can be toxic. Of course, a woman can lie, cheat, and steal like anyone else. Of course, men and women are both subject to virtue and vice. I would say, of course, we're both called to greatness. And I'd say we're compatible and we're complementary and that we actually can't truly be great without one another. And a lot of the greatest saints, St. Francis had St. Clare, you know, St. Therese of Avila had St. John of the Cross. And behind every quote, great man is a great woman and vice versa. I mean, the complement of the sexes is like fundamental. So when you have a thesis about toxic femininity, but you're just blaming the women, you're going to find, from me at first blush, a fundamental flaw in reasoning if there isn't any comment about it's not just the woman who did the thing, but the man who let her. And, you know, if we're going to claim to be Judeo-Christians and have read the book of Genesis and Adam and Eve, the apple, and it wasn't just the lady who took the apple, but the guy standing next to her who was like, I wonder what that tastes like, you know? So it's not just the women who've come in who are making sort of these demands. It's the men who've invited them, right? And so it's two to tango in any toxic work environment. So I'd say that, first of all. And so you read a lot online of just people blaming women carte blanche for like every societal ill, every problem at the workplace, as if there aren't men there too. And I've had issues when I was at big law firms where I can think of specific examples where, for example, they wanted me at one point to put pronouns on my bio. And I said, I can't bear false witness. And it's like, well, you are a female, so can't you do she, her? And I'm like, no, because it's an ideology. And I can't bear false witness to an ideology, and I'm a Catholic, so I'm definitely going to play that Title VII, you know, sweetheart. I don't think you want to bring this up again, HR. I'm not putting it on the bio. And it's illegal for you to ask. And so could you stop kindly? And by the way, can I point out that I'm the only female partner on this floor, and you haven't asked a single man to put the pronouns on the bio? And getting feedback saying, well, as a woman, we can't have you not. It's one thing if the guys don't, but you have to. And so it's like, so by the way, people with these theories that women are ruining the world, we're being told you have to and the men don't. We're being scapegoated to a certain extent. Now, am I also saying that women aren't to blame? No. I mean, you're responsible for your behavior, but everyone should be responsible. So I have just like lots of thoughts about this. Do I think there's like toxic femininity that sort of can take over? Yeah, like when if a woman's vices that women are particularly susceptible to do are suddenly being characterized as virtues. And so one thing I liked about her theory is like this idea that cancel culture is sort of fundamentally feminine. I mean, it kind of is. Like, women can be gossips and they can be mean. And Mean Girls, I mean, there's a movie, Mean Girls. And so now you sort of institutionalize like the mean girl reaction, which is horribly stricken by Vice, as like, this is actually what it means to be professional, like as if it's good to sort of cancel people. And so now, I mean, has that taken over to certain corporate cultures? Yes. Have men allowed it?
Yeah.
Have they facilitated it?
Yeah.
Have they demanded it? I mean, I've had male general counsels of law firms tell me that you as a woman are a waste of a female equity partner if you don't support these programs.
Yeah.
That wasn't a woman. That wasn't a toxic woman who made that phone call. So I don't know. I'm suspicious. Another thing about her article, she talks about like, if she's diagnosing like, what's the problem? It's Title VII and it's employment laws. And if it wasn't for all these laws, then women wouldn't, you know, frankly, I'd probably, I guess, be able to work, maybe is her conclusion. So there'd be fewer women. And so there wouldn't be such a problem. Because once we reached over 50%, that's kind of when the women took over and the women are terrible. Yeah. And I would say that it's not the employment laws. If you look at the nature of the laws themselves, don't just facilitate bad behavior. And they're not necessarily incompatible with even Christian ethic about the dignity and vocation of all people. I mean, should we discriminate based on your sex? I mean, that's an ethical question. There might be practical considerations, like for firemen. I don't know. I'm not trying to speak in a blanket term. Yeah. But anyway, I think that there's other issues that she did never address, which is like the sexual revolution, birth control pills, you know, hormone replacement therapies that fundamentally change the chemical structure of a woman's brain. And you're not allowed to say that might actually affect a woman's thinking and her temperament and her ability to sort of process emotions in a rational way. And like, is it possible that the flooding of hormones since girls were 14 up until they make partner a law firm has affected somehow their judgment and their ability to function with men when all of their hormones have been, you know, deregulated their entire life? Yeah. We're not allowed to talk about that. We can't blame that. You know, we're just going to blame like Title VII. So anyway, I think there's other things, you know, but I'm a lawyer. I'm paid to be critical. So of course, Catherine, I can answer your question and come up with 18 million things that, you know, she didn't talk about the complementarity of the sexes and she only blamed women and she didn't mention birth control. Yeah. But the overall thesis I thought was really interesting. And I do think it's something that is an important conversation to have. And that, yes, absolutely. Is there sort of a plague of toxic, quote, femininity at the office? I would say in a lot of places, yes. And it's complemented by toxic masculinity, which the sort of derivative today of that is like this chronic beta male who refuses to stand up for what's right.
To step up,
And so you have like a mutual toxicity in these offices. And that's part of what my law firm offers, which is like, would you just like to be a lawyer again? Yeah. Would you just like, did you spend all your life working hard? Did you go to Stanford and Yale or Columbia and Princeton and Harvard, like all the lawyers at my firm, and then go to work and walk into this ridiculous sophomoric mess of these imbeciles where all they want to talk about is pronouns? Or would you actually like to defend clients, go to court, litigate, and be a lawyer again? And that's sort of part of what we did with my law firm is like, can we just be lawyers again?
You're gonna get all these flood of applications when this podcast
because
hits
it's like, can we just be lawyers? So anyway, I do
move to Houston.
I love reading when people have, I mean, when these articles come out, I love reading them, but I do have sort of my own, I think sort of independent thoughts about some of them.
Yeah. And no, this isn't the place to do a whole deep dive, but I mean, I'm with you. I think it was a tremendously important piece to be out there. And I've been deeply wounded by women at work and kind of toxic femininity at work, but plenty of complaints about the male culture at work as well. So super interesting. Now, I also wanted to get your take on this kind of like flood of articles that we're seeing about people being 50 and lonely, which is, you know, this kind of other, you know, I guess I would say like, it's easy to talk about the women work stuff. It's easy to, there's this kind of set of things, but actually there's this like a darker tragic like underbelly to a lot of the things that you and I grew up through. I mean, I remember, I'll put it this way. I remember one of the women who was in the department when I was getting my PhD. And, of course, women didn't have kids.
Right.
I looked around. None of the female faculty when I was doing my PhD at Harvard had a child. That's not true now, but it was true when I was coming through. And this has to some extent changed. I mean, there's some signs. This is like some of this, people have questioned some of the heterodoxy around that. No one said anything encouraging. If I got any comments at all, it was like, you're too pregnant to be in the room, like leave, you're making me uncomfortable, things like that. There was another one that was really silly, like, 3, do you think that's healthy for you? And I was like, define health. But anyway, she I will not name her, but she said at one point, it was like the only encouraging thing that was ever said to me in 12 years doing about my family. And she said something like, your peers will question their single-mindedness later. Mm-hmm. And it was like, it was like, wait, did you actually say that? Did you? But it was the hint towards, and I never knew anything about her personal life. I don't know anything about her decisions. I don't know if her lacking a child was purposeful or, something that was a great cross to her. I don't know. The answer wasn't something we were ever going to talk about. But maybe we're seeing that play out. We're seeing those women. I mean, this conversation we had 15 years ago, and we're seeing those people hit 50, 55. They don't have children, and people are talking about it now.
Yeah. The lens through which I see it is the same sort of virtue ethic, magnanimity versus acedia, and being called to being great-hearted, and acedia being the contrary vice, small-heartedness. And magnanimity being called to great things. And part of that, I think, especially for women, is to be courageous and brave in relationships. And so to me, when I think about what's a magnanimous woman or a magnanimous man, the Aristotelian picture or Thomas Aquinas or sort of the classical is sort of this aloof man who is not influenced by what other people think and does these amazing, great things, compelled by wanting to sort of build the common good, and becomes so noble and so influential that he doesn't run for office. People are begging him to sort of be in control, and they give him awards. He doesn't want them. He doesn't care what you think. And sort of financially independent, no, just totally independent. And a lot of that's very compatible with like this American vision of sort of individualism and rugged individualism. But Aquinas adopts all this, baptizes it, and Jesus flips it on its head and says the greatest will be least and the least will be great. And you start really looking into and Jesus and St. Paul to the Corinthians, they're talking to the Greeks. I mean, they're talking to the people that have this virtue ethic, and they're turning it on their head and actually saying to be great is to be small. It's like Trezor Sue being like small things that are like, wait a second, what are you saying? And so humility actually becomes sort of like this pinnacle virtue that complements the prudence and the courage and the self-control and all the other virtues that are gobbled up into magnanimity. All this to say, we are not teaching kids in high school civics about magnanimity and being great-hearted. And to the extent that we are, we're certainly not telling the girls. We're telling the girls a version of it, which is a horrible perversion and distortion about being like the boss bee or whatever. And so when I think about these lonely women, it's that I just see that they have been coached, and they're not victims. They have agreed. They've colluded. They have cooperated in the lie, that to be small-hearted, to be small-hearted. And we have to, I have a lot of, my heart's broken for this, because I was very fortunate to have a Father Bill when I was 15 telling me to read Teresa of Avila, and John Paul II saying, go into the deep, writing encyclicals to women, saying everywhere men are, women should be. I had those voices from the very beginning of my formation that became the foundation. And a lot of women don't have that. Their foundation is so vapid. And of course, it's meaningless because it lacks that relationship. So what essentially men and women are being called to is this acedia, this contrary virtue, which is like to be actually afraid of those relationships, to be terrified of children. Women are terrified of having children. Men are too lazy and terrified. It's not like these women just want to work. They also have
Yeah.
husbands who would love a dual income, who would love to have more
Yep.
stuff, who would love to go on vacation. And when you get into it, when women do get married and they work and they have the allowed socially acceptable 1 or 2 kids, if they want more, like in your book, a lot of those women had the one and the second, they start getting like, almost greedy, like, oh, this is awesome. And it's their husband who says no.
Yeah.
They're small-hearted. It's acedia. It's this vice that's not just like sloth or laziness. It's worse. It's a rejection of being called to great relationships. And so, you're gonna be lonely if you are choosing from the beginning of your career a path that doesn't involve marriage, family, children, relationships. Then you're not going to have, when you're 50, marriage, family, children, relationships. And a lot of women aren't understanding too, and they're learning. I mean, it's sort of like mathematical. We get older as women, and it's sort of like on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your quote value on the market? I mean, I understand that I'm 43 and I'm going to have 5 kids. Something happens to my husband. What am I, a 2? I get it.
Yeah.
I'm not probably getting married again. I mean, this is like a horribly like secular, sort of utilitarian way to look at it. But like, ladies, your 20s, like, find the guy.
Yep.
Thank God for the priest who was like, Marcella, you need to go to the bar if you want to get married, because you're going to end up out of law school single. And I promise you it's harder.
Yeah.
And so I remember, I also remember being sort of like challenged. And I coach a lot of young women who want to work, who feel called to work, but obviously want to get married, that, it takes bravery. I mean, I was scared to have my first kid. I was scared to have my second kid. I'm still scared. It's scary.
I know.
Now I've got like maternal health issues. I'm like, am I going to leverage out? I mean, this is like, I'm 43, but I'm trying to be open. I'm trying to be big hearted. I'm trying to be a great saint.
Yeah.
So it's not like those fears suddenly go away. You just kind of get better at processing them, and you recognize the lies and you dismiss them more quickly. Teresa of Avila called these lies against great heartedness as like a barking dog. She'd be like, just back off. Like, I'm called to greatness. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but like there's a whole loneliness epidemic. And it's like, well, obviously, because you've chosen poorly. You've chosen poorly,
I'm going to clip in that scene from Indiana Jones. You chose poorly.
You chose, and it's sad because there's so much regret. But God is good. I'll tell you this. And you pray, and God can introduce you to someone. And, there's, who am I to say there isn't someone that's going to be for you or whatever? But is the solution sort of like IVF and surrogacy and this? No. Like, you're just adding more pain. I mean, at some point, we stop and we say, okay, God, like, I'm going to surrender to your will and how you built me. And I was made for relationships. I wasn't made for a petri dish, and just trying to at some point stop being open. But I really feel a lot of I see it all the time. And I see it with friends of mine who have 3 kids and they got the vasectomy and they regret it, but their husband refuses to reverse it. And I said, well, it's dangerous to reverse it. And it's like, it was dangerous to get it, brother. Like, And so even with people with kids, they struggle with this acedia, with this terrible fear of having a bigger family. They're terribly afraid of the social stigma, all the neighbors wondering, don't you know how that happens? Don't you know how that works? They don't like the social, so there's acedia everywhere, even within people who are married. So I wouldn't even leave the loneliness to just the single women. There's a lot of men and women that are married that have spouses that won't let them have more kids. And that's a very long loneliness as well.
It is. It wasn't until I wrote this book that I got these messages on Instagram. I don't even know how to use Instagram. Still haven't figured it out. Maybe I'll have to up my game. But I get these messages on Instagram. They're so tragic. Like, I read, I love, read your book. My first baby was like the best thing that ever happened to me. How can I persuade my husband to let me have another one? Or worst one I ever came across was I really wanted a second, and my husband made me like sign a contract. Like all the things that I was going to agree to do or not do if we had a second. We had the second, but now I want a third, and there's no contract that's going to make him happy. And of course, like part of me is like, you're in the wrong marriage, but of course I'm not going to counsel anybody to leave their marriage. But I'm horrified at the thought that you could be
but Catherine,
in that sort of situation.
I thought it was only toxic women who didn't want to have kids. Aren't men just all of the men, just the big-hearted, big-souled saints? And it's only the women. No, it's men and women who have made poor choices. And also, obviously, I'm not like the Captain Perfect over here. I have my own struggles, and God gives me my struggles to continue to humble me. Like I said, 7 miscarriages, and we have the gap 10, 8, 6, 4.
Yeah.
Well, my 2-year-old was a set of twins that didn't make it. Now we're pregnant, and I have 6 weeks to go. And do I absolutely recognize that we could add this to we don't know what's going to happen here. We're trying to stay open. God does an amazing thing by using suffering to help us stay grounded. And it's, remember, keeping that ear to the ground of what it is he wants us to do. I will say that there's tremendous suffering out there because of people's decisions on having kids and not having kids, and the sexual revolution. Again, I don't blame Title VII for this, people.
Yeah.
Suddenly, does that sound as absurd? Yeah. It's absurd. It's not Title VII. It's the sexual revolution. And it's a social experiment we've been playing for a long time. And it's then these ideas that we layer on top of it, like women like me or you, Catherine, or others, also just shouldn't be working for some. I mean, it's like all these incompatible, inconsistent ideas are piling on to men and women. And so God's really good at taking suffering and redeeming it. And so I'm pretty excited to see that, to the extent people are willing to sort of sit in an adoration chapel in the silence and be like, God, do something with this. He's really good at taking things that are bad and making them new, and taking suffering and turning it into greatness, and taking that mustard seed and turning it into the great, mustard tree or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's sad and there's a lot of suffering, but at the same time, when you're just watching how God works, he loves to take these drastic situations and make them into these ridiculous, successes. He takes the cross, right? And he saves humanity. Also, some of my favorite, biblical analogies in dire times is, I love that story of Moses with the Pharaoh chasing him in the Red Sea. And, God's such a drama king. It's like, I see it every day in my daily life. It's like, just when you think it can't get any worse, and then he parts the sea and you go through, and it's like, well, did you really have to make it that dramatic? I mean, did it have to get that bad? But, and I guess if I'm God and I'm omnipotent and I'm omnipresent, you might get bored and you need a little something to spice up your daily life. But it's like, but what's interesting about that story, and it's in the Talmud, but not the Bible, is the guy who was actually the first one to jump in to the sea. And I forget his name, but it sounds like Nacho. So as a Texan, I'm like, it's Nacho. But no, they're there. Moses is there. He puts the staff down. The water doesn't move. And so this guy jumps in to the water, almost drowns, and then the sea parts. And so you actually have to jump into the deep, which is, again, John Paul II, don't be afraid to go into it. That's my Polish accent. Go into the deep. You got to jump in. That's when God parts. So all these desperate people that are lonely and all that, it's like, this is actually where God likes to act. This is actually where God wants you to stop and listen and see what he's doing. And he wants to make this new, and he wants to baptize this situation and turn it into you finally cooperating with what he's trying to do to redeem you, your family, and even civilization. And maybe this horrible cross you've been bearing with your infertility or your loneliness is actually what God's going to use when you offer it back to him to do something great, and that does finally make it worth it. Anyway, I have, those were my prayers anyway, that all this suffering is not for nothing.
I feel like we could go on all day. And also I sort of feel like Friday morning with Marcella should be like a fixture of this podcast. I'm also a little concerned about how much your time is worth.
I'm not charging.
You're not charging me yet. Those are billable hours. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And anything else you want to get on record in case I can't have you back for a while? But I will. I'll check back in with you and you have your baby.
Anytime.
We want to see baby Burke. But anything else you want to get on record addressing the fear, the acedia? Can people who are not Catholic, who are listening, can they go to this adoration thing that you keep talking about? Like, what is that?
Of course. Yeah.
What is it? And can people go?
Yes. Yeah. And acedia and magnanimity, these are all virtues and vices discussed long before Christ was born. So you could learn all about virtue ethics, which will get you pretty far on the path to happiness.
Yeah.
We tell our kids, what's the reward for virtue? Happiness. So when our kids are having a tantrum and screaming and angry, we're like, oh, what's the reward for virtue? Happy? Are you not happy? Oh, you think it has something to do with the fact that you're being punished for like whatever it is you just did to your brother? Anyway, you don't have to be Christian to the extent that that's like some horrible stigma you can't get over to, to think about growing in virtue and making your heart bigger. I think that if the goal is, I want a bigger heart, I want a bigger heart, bigger for humanity, bigger vision, bigger dreams, bigger, more. I want more. Yeah. And when you want more and you allow yourself to have more, that's not something that's like a Christian thing. Now, it's also a Christian thing. And St. Thomas Aquinas baptized all of these ideas. And Aristotle didn't get everything right. And Aquinas did a lot of correcting. And then we have, of course, like a millennia of Catholic Church teaching to the extent that you aren't just completely, it's anathema to think about reading Catholic stuff. But we have amazing tradition on virtue ethics in a Christian light and lens that incorporates millennia of thought leadership on this, really culminating in Edith Stein, a Jew who became a Catholic and who died in the Holocaust as a nun, also on the list of like amazing women. Okay, who behaved
also inspired by Teresa of Avila.
Yeah, Teresa of Avila is a real titan, people. If they haven't gotten the message. Yeah. So Edith Stein, who then John Paul II was basically cribbing Edith Stein on half of his stuff. I mean, Edith Stein was really someone he listened to. There's also a woman called Sister Prudence Allen. I mean, she's still alive. There's something called the Anthology of Women. It's like the Norton Anthology of English Literature, but it's like what we've thought about women over time. It's amazing. So I would say you can just learn. And it's an amazing, if you just let yourself afford the possibility that God wants more for you. And, I hope that to just, part of why I would be on a podcast like yours, Catherine, is to give practical reassurance that you can be flexible and you can do more than one thing. And you can have kids and you can work and you can just you're just trying to have a big heart and a big life.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's something, there's a wrench thrown in and it becomes obvious, like, well, God put a block to that one and staying flexible. I don't know. Yeah. But Christianity really does have a lot of these answers. And I'll say the Catholic Church has a lot of these answers. And there's a lot of stigma about having families. There's a lot of stigma about having kids. There's a lot of stigma about having more than one or two kids. There's a lot of stigma about being Christian. There's a lot of stigma about being Catholic. And, to the extent we're finally willing to be like, I'm miserable. And maybe all these people are wrong. And maybe there are ideas that are ancient. And maybe like the medieval mystics like Teresa of Avila were onto something. Maybe the Enlightenment wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And all these ideas I've been sort of like ruthlessly defending and living out that make me miserable should be reconsidered. I don't know. I would say that would be my final thought.
I love that.
Just being a little contrarian to the zeitgeist, which shoves down your throat like all of these ideas, which at the end of the day to being small-hearted and sort of navel gazing and scared. And it's like, well, let's be open to the idea of a bigger heart, bigger life.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe God's doing something.
Yeah. Marcella, bigger heart. Have a bigger heart, Burke. We'll title your episode. We have to come up with the title.
This. I can't remember where I read this, but someone had said something about how people will discover they seem to miss about like my personality. Like I may not be, I'm sort of like, I try to be kind as a matter of virtue, but maybe I'm not as a matter of personality. So
yeah.
Not everyone's like
people
me,
say that,
Catherine, but
people say that about my husband a lot, and he would be the first to volunteer that. So I recognize that. Yeah. Well, I think if we have two goals in this podcast, and we're still sort of working out our vibes and our traditions, and like we'll get we have two goals. One is to really just talk about the reasons why people want kids and have wanted them in the past, and sort of like zeroing in on the value of children. But the other piece, in a sense, is really to sort of open up the imagination, to help form the imagination of American women and men. What does it mean to form? I mean, people talk about forming conscience, but actually we just need to form imagination. People don't know what's possible. And sometimes it's like, well, actually, we need just another piece. You can just do things. I love the "you can just do things" memes, but also like, you need to sort of have an idea of what you can do before you can apply. You can just do things. So that's the space and these are great. You've just given us some, you've opened imagination here in so many different ways. So it's like pretty great stuff.
And also, if you just believe what the Bible says about children, like just pop it into Grok. What does the Bible say about having kids? How many times does the Bible say having kids is a blessing? I mean, it's thousands. I mean, it's like the whole Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like outrageous. It's like, if you could just think about, just consider being open to the possibility that kids are a blessing. I know you all are Christian and you go to the church and you got the praise band and the fog machines and you love Jesus.
Yeah.
But if you could be open to the possibility about what the Bible says about kids, okay? It's not just a Catholic
really
thing.
true.
It's not just the Catholics, okay? Pretend like, it's possible. Yeah. Another thing is the Bible 365 times has a different version of saying, be not afraid. So every day of the year, you got a different way that God's trying to tell you to not be afraid. And for people, at least with someone like a temperament like mine, once I realize I'm afraid of something, well, at that point, it's like, well, then obviously I have to just like do the opposite at this point. It's just a matter of like execution, because like what an embarrassment to be too afraid to do something. Like that's so pathetic. And so I would say, be not afraid. Now, does this mean everyone is called to have kids and 10 of them? No, absolutely not. Jesus was an only child, right? I mean, it's like, no, but do we need to stay open to the idea, the possibility, right? We always say family first, but kids really are awesome. Kids really are a blessing. Kids really represent more than $1 million bonus, and they're hilarious and they're funny. And all that, read Charles Murray, read whatever non-Christian it takes you to read to have an endorsement that isn't a Catholic, because if your bias is just so blinding, you can't hear it from a Catholic. Well, read Charles Murray, read Blaise Pascal. Like, it's like, there's also a lot of people who aren't Catholic who say these things, and your quality of life and your happiness is correlated to your cooperation with virtue. And when we figure that out, I think life gets a lot better. I mean, like remarkably better, but you have to get off Instagram. You have to get off X. I'm not on Facebook. You have to ignore this sort of bombardment of the opposite of all this, because you're just not going to get it. I mean, the only place I even get it is when I happen to have 5 minutes to talk to Catherine, or if I'm going to read like Teresa Lisieux or somebody. I mean, everybody else is saying something different about what's going to make you happy. Yeah. There's very few people who are going to be like, no, it's actually like the kids are better. There's just so much out there about how terrible it is. Anyway, so I don't want to beat the dead horse. And a lot of people can't have them, and that's a separate cross. And that is a cross. And so there's a huge need in the world for people to serve that role, that mother, that feminine genius in their day-to-day for those kids who don't have a mom or a dad who is integrated into a faith life or into reality. And so to be open to being a mom and a dad figure, which God desperately needs all of us to continue to cooperate. If it wasn't for Father Bill when I was 15,
Amazing.
Who really sort of adopted me and started sharing these ideas with me, I don't know where I'd be today. So to be encouraged as a single person, that it's not like there isn't a role for you to change people's lives. Obviously, the feminine genius and the masculine genius are needed desperately, within your home, but also within just your community.
Yeah. Amen. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Catherine,
This was really fun.